was doing some presentations for the European weightlifting coaches, and I'd asked someone what they thought would be a good topic, and they mentioned athlete retention, and particularly in retaining athletes from that junior to senior level, which is always a problem. Athletes are winning as juniors, doing well, winning medals, going to big events, and all of a sudden, uh, they reach that age where they're no longer eligible as a junior and have to compete against seniors. And oftentimes that's a difficult time. It's sort of a downtime for athletes, and there needs to be some way to keep their interest and involvement. But I decided to go ahead and look at the full spectrum there with the young athletes as well there. I had a pre I get a little mixed up with the time zones there. And so I'm a little off. I have a commitment here in about 35 minutes. So what I may do is break this into two parts and talk primarily about retention of youth athletes there. And then at another time, get more into elite athlete retention. So the topics are why children participate in sports, why children quit sports, burnout, efforts to retain children in sports, and retention of elite athletes. So this is based on research. I try to include both my personal experience as a coach and also with research. I'm a professor and really promote the sports science, and we need to look at that. But of course, uh, as they say, coaching is maybe 50-50 science and art, where you need to learn the science um, to be better at the art of coaching. So, based on research, Weinberg and Gove found that reasons kids participate in sport is number one, it's fun, do something they're good at, improve skills, get exercise and become fit, be with their friends and make new friends, and to compete. Other research shows to learn new skills, fun, affiliation, thrills and excitement, exercise and fitness, and competitive challenge or winning. The fun always shows up in all the research there. Kids got to enjoy themselves. So what makes sport fun? So here's some things. Being a good sport, positive team dynamics, in other words, friends and uh, enjoying their teammates, being supported by their teammates, trying hard, good hard practices that are satisfying, positive coaching. And I think this one that I've found through the years that I've tried to do is when the coach treats players with respect. And sometimes that's hard because the coaches always want to gravitate towards those athletes that are good and perform well. But and maybe some of the older athletes, but my belief is that we have to treat all the athletes the same, regardless of their skills, their age. Um, treat everyone with respect there. Learning and improvement, developing new skills. So we need to have variety, and they need to be, ever learning throughout. Uh, Kids makes it fun when you have good support. People cheer at the game. It's one thing I like about the sport of weightlifting. I've coached American football, I've coached athletics, and in weightlifting, if you mess up, you miss a lift. Generally, people are still cheering for you, even if you miss the lift. So I think it's a wonderful sport for kids. Of course, they like games. They want to get in the game. They don't want to, sit on the sideline the whole time. They like well-organized practices, not just practice, but well-organized. They like team friendships, having fun, goofing off with teammates, um, stress relief from exercise, from playing, the mental bonuses. And they like team rituals, like doing a cool team cheer. Um, is that the haka they call it in New Zealand with their team, and just little things like that, just having a good time and swag, traveling to new places to compete. I coached a weightlifter for 19 years, the name of Kendrick Ferris, and Kendrick made three Olympic teams and was a Pan American champion three times. And that's one thing Kendrick said. I've talked to him, about what kept you, involved. He said the travel was one thing. When he was young, we traveled a long road trip to his first competition when he was 12, and he said he enjoyed it so much. And he played other sports, but as he got better in weightlifting and saw the opportunities to travel, that's one thing that helped him to gravitate more towards wanting to do weightlifting. And I've seen that with other kids. They get that opportunity to travel, and once they do, they want to stay involved. So anything you can do, any kind of special events are great to do with the kids there to keep their interest. Another thing is we talked about the positive coaching. Here's some of the factors regarding positive coaching. Again, this respect. I think that is so important, and just trying to treat all your athletes equally there. Of course, athletes like when you encourage the team, but of course in a true manner, no false encouragement. Having a coach has a positive role, getting clear, consistent communication from coaches. Things that are you know, not just wishy-washy, something one day, something the next, but be consistent with the kids. Of course, they want the coach who knows a lot about the sport, um, someone who allows mistakes, and then still remains positive. Um, Coach who listens to players. I think listening is so important and such a good skill, and sometimes it has to be learned. I know I took several when I in my graduate studies took several courses in counseling, and one of them was a course that heavily got into listening skills, and it's sometimes you have to study that; they just don't happen. Uh, you know, Listening is a skill, I believe, and it's so important, and it's important to listen to what your athletes are saying. Uh, Coach who can you can talk easily to, something athletes like. They like a nice, friendly coach. They like getting compliments from the coaches. We could spend a whole lesson on feedback, but uh, feedback is so important. Positive feedback is very important. I've said before when I first started lifting, I had a guy that I trained with who had several more years experience than I had, and I asked him to look at one of my lifts and tell me what I did wrong in the lift. And he said, I'll do that, but I'll also tell you what you do right. And I think it's important that in feedback to the athletes that we need to correct any mistakes, but we also need to reinforce things they're doing right. And I think it's always when the kids leave at the end of the day, it's nice to give them some sort of compliment, not just in general that you did well, but point something specific out that they did uh, in practice training that day. Um, yeah, sometimes the athletes like when the coach participates, gets involved with what's going on, and not always, but they like when the coach, has a sense of humor and jokes around with them. So these are things based on research from VSEC on positive coaching. So this is interesting here. I found this study uh, that looked at over 1,602 middle school students. Now, this was done nearly 20 years ago. I question maybe if they'd find the same results now. Um, Boys were more motivated by the competitive aspects of sports, and girls were more attracted by social opportunities at this time. It may still be the same, but the important thing to take from this is they pointed out that more difference existed within these groups than between them. So the key point here is it's important for coaches to attempt to understand the unique motivations of each young athlete they coach. So the point is to treat the athletes you coach as individuals. And these are some reasons children quit. They don't learn new skills. It's no fun, no, lack of affiliation, lack of thrills and excitement, lack of exercise and fitness, no challenge or failure. And that gets into a whole thing I've talked about before on Sports Wave Africa is goal setting, which is so important and fits so perfectly here. In setting goals, you provide some challenges there, and even with what may be failures, um, with outcome goals, may your process goals and your personal goals may you may succeed in those. So goal setting is so important with the kids as early as you can. Get them involved in that. Perceived competence. Children who discontinue often have low perceived competence. They tend to focus on ego goals. In other words, they're comparing themselves to others. Um, they exhibit less self-determined intrinsic forms of motivation, and they experience considerable stress. The most distinguishing factor in distinguishing participants from those who drop out is according to research, their level of perceived competence. So again, lower perceptions of abilities, people that have that um, low level of perceived competence, they have a perception that they're not as good as others. They tend to compare themselves to others, and therefore they may not participate or they tend to drop out. Those that feel better about themselves, feel like they're able to achieve um, the skills that they're attempting, keep at it longer. So the coach needs to enhance the children's self-perceived ability. Again, one of those things is with goal setting, keeping that positive and keeping that positive atmosphere in the gym. We say here you got to teach them to evaluate their performances by their own standards and improvements, rather than just winning and losing. We can do that with goal setting. Weightlifting again is a great sport, athletics, those things that you can set goals as far as, how fast you're going to run, how high you're going to jump, how far you're going to throw, weightlifting, how much you're going to lift. You can look at a lot of different lifts, and that goes hand in hand with goal setting there. So, it's just not about first, second, or third place. It's achieving personal goals there. Okay. Those are so important. We hear that a lot in weightlifting and athletics. And those are wonderful sports to improve uh, that perceived competence with kids there. Achievement goal theory contends that people have different ways to define ability. So the adoption of a self-reference task or mastery goal orientation or an ego or outcome orientation where they define ability relative to beating others. So it's really preferable to be, um, have that self-reference task or mastery goal orientation. They're going to if you're always trying to compare yourselves to others, unless you're a super athlete, you're going to run into trouble there. And um, it's just best to be more of that self-reference task or mastery goal orientation to have that with your program. So they say that young athletes who adopt the task orientation are not only more likely to have higher perceived competence, but of course they're going to stay involved in the sport. And those who have the ego orientation are more likely to withdraw. The self-determination theory of motivation, of course, has been researched in youth sports. Um, the self-determination theory proposes three basic motives that the feeling of competence, the feeling of autonomy, and relatedness. And children are more likely to stay in sport and participate if they become more competent, um, have some autonomy over the decisions made, and experience relatedness with teammates and coaches. I guess there's balance with this autonomy. You can't just let the kids come in and set the practice up or, the training schedule. But, that somehow to get them involved, even if it's with the goal setting, to me, that's part of having them make decisions. If, in the sport of weightlifting, they're going to, this is what you're going to work on, and this is what we're trying to achieve here. These are your goals. So, some, it's good to have the kids to have some, uh, part in what's going on there. So again, as it says here, when the athletes don't feel competent in what they do, they have no say, and they don't feel connected with the coach and their teammates, they're more likely to drop out. This was a study that was done with this is 50 swimming dropouts between 10 and 18 years of age, and these were some of the reasons they quit. Other things to do, change in interest. Uh, Other reasons included not as good as I wanted to be, not enough fun, wanted to play another sport, didn't like the pressure, boredom, didn't like the coach, training was too hard, and not exciting enough. It said up to 28% cited negative factors such as excessive pressure, dislike of the coach, failure, lack of fun, and an overemphasis on winning. Another study here, um, two of the top reasons, other things to do and decline in excitement. Other reasons, not able to be with my friends, not enough team spirit, and wanted to play another sport. It says results showed coaches and teammates were the two most influential groups affecting the young athletes' decisions to quit. We'll talk a little bit about burnout. Burnout, as it says, differs from simply dropping out because it involves such characteristics as psychological and emotional exhaustion, negative responses to others, low self-esteem, and depression. Um, Burnout is just one reason that athletes may drop out of sport. Burnout can be defined as a physical, emotional, and social withdrawal from a formerly enjoyable sport activity. It's characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, reduced sense of accomplishments, and sport devaluation. It occurs as a result of chronic stress, as a perceived or actual imbalance between what is expected of an athlete physically, psychologically, and socially, and his or her response capabilities. Here are some factors associated with burnout with young athletes. Uh, Very high self and other imposed expectations, which include the coach and family and such. Bring up one point there. I was asked one time, what do I do to reduce anxiety with weightlifting? And I let the athletes know that, that my attitude towards them will be the same regardless of their performance. And I think that's very important. Not only do I think it's very important, you'll find that in the research that sometimes athletes feel that the coach's attitude towards them or their feelings towards them, likes or dislike, are all based on their performance. And it needs to be real clear that that and you need to separate out your, you know, attitude and such towards the athletes from their performance. So, oftentimes the pressure comes from the coach. They feel that extra pressure. They feel it from their family, their friends, and of course from themselves. But if the coach may not be able to do anything about the family and friends, they can try to. But I think if the coach lets the athletes know that, their attitude towards them will not change regardless of their performance, it does reduce some of that pressure and anxiety. Other things are win at all cost attitude, of course, parental pressure, long repetitive practices with little variety, inconsistent coaching practices. We already mentioned that about keeping consistent with what you do. Um, overuse injuries from excessive practice, excessive time demands, high travel demands. They like to travel, but not too much there as they get better. Love from others displayed on the on the basis of winning and losing, as we just mentioned there. So, uh, and maladaptive perfectionism. So overtraining's somewhat similar, not exactly the same as burnout there. The key with overtraining is that decrement in performance that occurs. Both of them have um, physiological and psychological signs and symptoms. Sometimes they say that burnout, definition wise, may deal a little bit more on the psychological side, with overtraining being more on the physical side. But both are, the result of too much too often without recovery there. Um, one of the, one of the things that can help with that is a good training program. Periodization works well with different, it's a phasic method of manipulating variables in your training there. And we've talked about that before. Anything that like that, the goal setting or overtraining, periodization. If anyone wants any additional information on that, I'll be glad to share that. At the end, I'll give you my contact information. So this is something related to burnout and overtraining. I think coaches need to know that, there's a lot of things that can affect performance there. And of course, the key is adaptation. It's not just train, train, train. The athletes need to, if they don't recover, then whatever training you've, presented, is worthless. Okay. So there has to be a balance between the stimulus and the ability to recover and adapt to that training. So make sure you know that there's other things such as work, school, social life, training, how much they sleep and eat, social, physical environment, coach, athlete, teammate interaction, all those things. Of course, heredity plays a big part. Everyone's different. So sometimes we have to adjust the training based on this, based on the other things going on in the athlete's life so they don't burn out or overtrain. So, yeah, as far as recovery adaptation, good training program not only has a good stimulus, effective, but also built-in rest. Okay. So, uh, sometimes there's a lot of things these days, compression sleeves, uh, debates on whether to use ice or heat, but massage, different forms of hydrotherapy have been used, but sleep and nutrition are the most critical, and those are so important with the athletes. So, uh, it's important to monitor fatigue. It's important to monitor your athletes to see where they're at. So we can monitor athletes in two ways. Fatigue management and program efficacy to see if the program's working. We can do this on different levels, micro and macro. Um, Again, this is some information we don't, that this is not the focus of this talk here, but it goes hand in hand. That we don't want to overtrain the athletes at any level from a junior level to elite there. So we need to monitor the athletes. Training logs, nutrition logs, sleep patterns, injury reporting, technique analysis, recovery questionnaires, and with the females, menstrual cycle surveys. Here's some guidelines for coaching young athletes. And I got this from Small and Smith, from Weiss, a bunch of different individuals cited here below. This is some good advice. Affirming instructional, supportive, and autonomy supported behaviors are highly desirable to use when coaching young athletes. Avoid punitive, hostile, and controlling coaching behaviors. Focus on catching kids doing things right and give them plenty of praise and encouragement. Praise frequently. Focus on what is done correctly rather than on errors. I had a good friend named CJ Bennett who was a referee, and CJ had cerebral palsy, and CJ did both weightlifting and powerlifting. Told me when he competed years ago, he didn't win any medal because they didn't have any special divisions for him, but he loved the sport. Um, I was writing an article one time on comparing weightlifting, powerlifting, and parapowerlifting, and I asked CJ, I said, do you do anything special when you train disabilities? And he laughed at me and he says, you don't train disabilities, you train abilities. So I thought that goes hand in hand with this, and that meant a lot to me as a coach there and changed some of the ways I think. As we mentioned before, the praise needs to be sincere. As it says, insincerity negatively affects your credibility as a coach. Again, with goal setting, develop realistic expectations. Reward effort as much as outcome. Focus on teaching and practicing skills. It says positive coaching techniques do not do much good unless those you are coaching see improvement in their skills. Modify skills and activities age appropriately in weightlifting, like lighter bars and disc. Modify rules to maximize action and participation. Reward correct technique, not just outcome. Create an environment that reduces the fear of trying new skills, and be enthusiastic as a coach. Elite athlete retention. These are some things that are so important with elite athletes. Develop trusting relationships, provide intentional support, prioritize athlete well-being, adapt to the athlete's needs, and try oftentimes to keep the athletes involved by getting them involved in other areas of the game. I think it's important that athletes know there may be, um, you know, uh, what are they going to do when they retire from the sport, and having some knowledge of what is to come uh, is something that the athletes want. Elite athlete retention can be improved by maintaining contact with the athletes. Again, this retirement's a whole other topic in it, but it's so important. And the athletes, I think, are more sometimes want to get out of it. They're worried about jobs and what they're going to do. And I think it's good for the coach to have good communication with the athlete and prepare them for retirement. Develop a personal plan for reintegration. Uh, and then, of course, monitoring, as we talked about earlier with athletes. So this was a survey done with in Australia with elite and pre-elite athletes, and what um, they felt that psychological skills and attributes, along with strong interpersonal relationships, were vital to their success. And as elite athletes, they rated recovery practices as very important, and the available support services that were necessary for recovery. So the conclusions of the study is an athlete development system um, into which these are included, all these things we talked about, may assist in generating an environment that facilitates athlete success, repeated podium performances, retaining athletes in high performance sport for longer, and encouraging human flourishing, well-being, and smooth transition for retiring athletes. These were a lot of the things they felt that related, all these different psychological factors, um, ability to adapt to change, resilience, self-discipline, mental toughness, and so on were so important. They felt like it was very important to have these services such as massage therapists, dietitians, nutritionists, sports medicine support, sports psychologists, chiropractors, uh, and natural type support. The network for those that supported them were coaches, teammates, parents, spouse, our partner, physiotherapists, family members, sports science, sports medicine, all these they felt siblings. They needed support from everyone there. So some of the recovery type methods that were important to them were massage, stretching, all these things. They felt as elite athletes were more important as they got to a more elite athlete. They needed all these type things that may help with recovery. So remember, you know, uh, I want to always mention about, adopting programs or adopting these type things. We can't always copy everyone. It's nice if we can do all this, but a lot of us don't have the resources, and I understand that. Um, I think it's important for the coach it's nice if you have sports science and sports medicine support, but I think that the coach needs to have a basic understanding, just like the coach may not be a medical doctor, but they need to know first aid and procedures to follow when a medical emergency arises there. So, ideally coaches should have a basic understanding of motor learning, motor development, biomechanics for teaching and analyzing technique, and understand some physiology for training programs and recovery methods. So we need to learn a little bit as much as we can, and just need to adapt. Sometimes we don't have all this sports science and sports medicine support, so we need to see what we can do on our own there. Of course, like with sports psychology, the coach shouldn't take the place of a sports psychologist. It's great when you have one, but we should understand a little bit about dealing with athletes because as coaches, we're the one with them on a daily basis. This was a study done by Milton that looked at things that were important. They felt that the during the transitional stage after a junior going into a senior year, that athletes fell into three categories: students, career, or professional athletes. At this point, they felt the biggest reason uh, for dropout was financial. Of course, no money, and that they didn't know what to expect during this transitional phase. So athletes need to know what to expect during this phase, going from junior to senior. Um, and who's responsible for that? Is it the coach, the parents, the federation, governing body? Um, there needs to be good communication there on what to expect during that phase. Other reasons, time consuming, training, too much training there, parental pressure to get a good education and become economically secure, or possibly lack of a suitable coaching and training environment at that point that may need to be more elevated. So the coach's role at this point, the coach should be more of a mentor and consultant. Coach needs to provide a suitable competitive environment to stretch the athletes and make them confront various challenges. Um, Relationship between the coach and athletes to develop in a holistic and cognitive way. Oftentimes, the athletes need to be encouraged to take more responsibility as they mature into an elite athlete. And they definitely still, even as young kids and all the way through elite athletes, they need a coach that delivers accurate analysis and positive feedback. This is my contact information. That's my WhatsApp number, +1 318 344 1561. I put my email address down there twice because sometimes with small letters it looks like one SUS, but it's kyle.pierce@lsus.edu. I'll be sharing this PowerPoint with John, and I've got some references on there. Any of those references, I'm glad to get the sources for you and any additional information. I know I just skimmed over things such as burnout, overtraining, goal setting, periodization, and I'll be glad to provide any articles or just talk or discuss with you if you just ever want to call me up. So always willing to, I don't have any secrets and I'm always willing to share. So thank you, John, for the opportunity here.
Thanks, Kyle, for such a wonderful and insightful presentation. I believe coaches have learned something, and at this moment, not to take more of your time, just to invite anyone with any question or any clarification to come on the floor. Anybody with any question or any clarification you need from Professor Kyle?
Well, just contact me if you need anything else. I'll be, again, I'm always glad to help out and anything I can do. Yeah, Coach Kish, John will be posting the PowerPoint there.
The video recording as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate
Right.
it.
There's no, if there's no any other concern, then just take this opportunity again to thank Kyle for availing himself. It was a short notice. And of course, to present to us. We're looking forward to more of such presentations. And of course, the coaches who attended, we also appreciate your time. It's not easy in the course of the week, but we don't have time over the weekend. This is the only best time we can do this. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we will keep you posted when we have another webinar like this. Thank you so much, Kyle, and have a good day.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you,
Bye-bye.
coaches, for attending. We'll share
Yes.
all this presentation via our website, the PowerPoint and the video. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye
Thank
to
you.
all.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much.